Welcome to Living the Smarter Science of Slim, where we provide a scientifically proven lifestyle for long-term health and fat loss by eating more and exercising less, but smarter.
Eat smarter, exercise smarter, live better. I am so ready for that.
Hey everyone, Jonathan Bailor back with another bonus Smarter Science of Slim podcast. Thrilled about today's guest, a man after my own heart, deep into the science, looking at people's brains, seeing how it can impact your life on every aspect. And he's doing it in a way which is super accessible because he's focused on food. And he's even talks about pharmacy, spelled with an F, like farm. He's out there making differences in people's lives. He's bringing it back to the science. He's the author of The Happiness Diet, of the upcoming, or just released, depending on when we air this show, 50 Shades of Kale. He is an assistant clinical professor of psychiatry over at Columbia University College of Physicians and Surgeons. He's also on the team over at Harper Wave, so we got a shout out to that. He is none other than Dr. Drew Ramsey. Welcome, Dr. Drew.
Jonathan, thank you. It's great to be here with you.
Well, Dr. Ramsey, I want to just jump in because it's non-obvious that the food we eat has as profound an impact on our brain neurochemistry as maybe even some drugs and such. Can you talk to us just about how important the food we eat is to our overall mental state and well-being?
For sure. It's absolutely fundamental, and you're right. We don't focus enough on it. It makes intuitive sense, though, right? Your brain is the most metabolically active organ you have. It burns about 20% of all the fuel that you eat. It's the largest concentration you have of those omega-3 fats that are so important to health and to staying well. Smart eaters are looking out for those. Well, you find a lot of those in the brain. The brain, because it's so metabolically active, needs not only a lot of nutrition, but needs a lot of those molecules that they kind of buffer the effects of burning fuel. So you get all these, the importance now that we're understanding these phytonutrients, like things like sulforaphane and camphorol. And then we clearly have really changed our diet, and there are a lot of reasons that we have such an increase in mental health issues. But certainly, now that antidepressants are the top class of medication prescribed in America, I think 40 million Americans suffer from anxiety disorders. We're now starting to really think about diet and the implications it has on our brain health and subsequent mental health symptoms.
And Dr. Ramsey, it seems like we're prone or subjected to a very terrible cycle, which is, let's say that we eat as we are quote unquote told to eat, which consists of all these nutrient poor edible products. We eat that way. We start feeling low energy. We start gaining some additional body fat. That certainly doesn't help our mood. That may even contribute in some level to depression because maybe people start treating us differently. And then we end up maybe getting some pharmacological help for that, and that actually ends up making us gain even more weight, and then we're in this vicious cycle.
Yeah, and especially when we think about weight gain and its effects on the brain, particularly how people gain weight these days, which is a lot of visceral fat. We know visceral fat is really pro-inflammatory, right? It's very metabolically active tissue, and it's making all of these signals that are pro-inflammatory, all these cytokines that are pro-inflammatory, and we're thinking now really clearly influence brain health. So, you're right, there's a self-esteem issue that happens with weight gain. There's also a physiological issue as you begin to mess around with things like insulin resistance, and insulin levels. I mean, insulin is something that's quite active in the brain. So it certainly should be on people's radar is, as you gain weight or as you're having mood changes, the first place to start, irrelevant of whether you need some Prozac or not, the first place to really start and have a good foundation is getting rid of all that processed food that you mentioned and switching over to a whole foods diet, minimally processed food, none of the sugar and the refined carbohydrates. That I really hope, and the main goal of my work is to try and get mental health clinicians and health practitioners to think about food as the foundation of building health for patients.
Dr. Ramsey, and I ask this because I've also had personal experience with it within my own family, and it seems with children, we get a kind of a double whammy here. One, it would seem that children are already a little bit more subject to, if you give a child a chemical, it's probably going to affect that child a bit more than if you gave it to a larger person, and just with cognitive development and such. And also, we live in a country where if you think of children's food or children's cereal or a children's menu, what makes something qualified to be called that?
Right. I think it's horrible. It's mainly that, it's way too colorful and it's hyper palatable, so it's easy to get kids hooked on.
And then we have these children who are now, I mean, you talk about, whether or not you need Prozac. It seems like we hear about ADHD and all of these behavioral problems in our generation of children, and it's people like, oh, it's the video games. Well, maybe, or maybe their brains are getting broken by what they're eating. What do you think?
I think it's for sure a big factor for a lot of children, and the science supports this, is the food. Certainly we always want to acknowledge there are kids out there who have a really, legit ADHD diagnosis and cognitive problem, and they benefit from stimulants like Adderall and Concerta. There's definitely those individuals out there, but what always frustrates me is that, that's not the place to start, because all of these medications have issues and side effects, as every prescriber and every parent knows. So let's think about what are the connections between food and ADHD, and it's quite clear. There's a very linear correlation between dietary quality and your risk of getting both ADHD and depression as a kid and an adolescent. There's been a lot of controversy, a lot of up and down science about things like food dyes. My colleague David Schaub at Columbia actually did the meta-analysis of all the food dye studies, and it's very clear in his study that there is a very strong positive trend in the correlation between food dyes and kids getting overly excitable. There's interesting stuff like if you give adults with attention deficit disorder food dyes, they start to have more epileptiform waves on their EEGs. And so I always kind of take the stance of, it's really hard to prove something in science, especially when it comes to food, because there's so many molecules that are active. But when you think about something like development and how much neurobiological activity there is during that period, shouldn't we feed the brain molecules it knows and it recognizes and it's always been sustained by? Isn't that like a good thing to do for our kids?
It absolutely is, Drew. And the reason I want to celebrate and magnify this science that you share with people is I think so often we have a mental model, which is, oh, Sally is 6, so she needs energy, so we can give her a Snickers bar, because where we may even want to think the opposite is true. Like, Sally is 6. She, more than anyone, needs to avoid Snickers bars because her brain and body are literally being built right now. And if you give someone like crappy bricks while they're constructing their house, maybe just wait till their house is built or never give them crappy bricks. What do you think?
No, I agree with you, and I think the other, you're definitely not giving great bricks. The other thing is that you're not giving great mortar in the sense of the food habits that someone develops really are very much dictated by the tastes they're exposed to and what they observe. So if you grow up in a house that sits around the dinner table and has a nice piece of fish and some kale and a dessert of fruit and yogurt, those are going to be the foods that you incorporate into your own habits and the foods that you eat for the rest of your life. If you're in a house where a Snickers bar is lunch, that's what you become accustomed to. So it's both bad bricks, but it's also teaching people and kids the wrong habits about food.
Well, and Drew, I know you have a soft spot in your heart, as do I, for kale, and you mentioned it there, and you also mentioned seafood, so you're 2 for 2 in my book.
Yeah.
And I think oftentimes people are very inspired by pursuing the positive in addition to attacking the negative. So what are some of the just almost classifiable as therapeutic foods when it comes to brain health and then overall emotional health, and why? What are they actually doing in the brain?
Right, and yeah, it's a great question, and I love the notion of let's tell people what to eat because we know what people should eat, and I call these brain foods, or I'm always trying to put hashtag brain food in my tweets. So let's start with what should be the foundation. We want people eating a lot of these dark leafy greens. I've clearly gotten a little obsessed with kale. As it's good news. A lot of people in America are excited about kale right now. But there are lots of leafy greens that are great for you besides kale, like bok choy and arugula, and all these cruciferous vegetables they're the same plant, just different cultivars. They're all related to cabbage phylogenetically, and so any of the crucifers are great. I love this new campaign of Eat Your Colors. I think that's the USDA is doing a great job with that because you want to see things like the tomatoes and the purple potatoes and lots of good oranges, sweet potatoes and carrots. What are those those foods, those cruciferous vegetables and colorful vegetables doing in the brain? They're doing a couple things. One, you're getting a lot of interesting fat-soluble phytonutrients, which we mentioned a little earlier. And I really think this is the reason that we see such a health benefit to vegetables. Those things change gene expression. You increase, one in kale called sulforaphane. It ramps up your liver's own innate detoxification system. I mean, it's a real detox diet. There's all this interesting data emerging about the anthocyanins and quercetin. On top of those sort of funkier things, you just get good nutrition, right? You get a lot of fiber that keeps you both full and also feeds your gut. And now we're really understanding there's this clear link between gut health and gut flora and overall health and brain health. Generally, folate comes from the Latin word folium, right? So, which is leaf. And so anytime you're eating a leaf, you're getting lots of vitamin B9. Vitamin B9 is essential to do things like make serotonin and dopamine, these important mood regulating neurotransmitters. Anytime you eat a leafy green, you're getting the plant-based omega-3 fat. You also need the animal-based omega-3 fat, in my opinion. But ALA, the plant-based omega-3, is also quite important and clearly linked to lower rates of diabetes and depression. And so those are sort of some of the reasons for plants. We can keep going on. The other top ones clearly are going to be seafood, especially small seafood. I really like to recommend mussels and anchovies and sardines. These are top sources of a longer chain omega-3s, EPA and DHA. We use those in supplement form in psychiatry all the time now as an augmentation strategy. Clear links to low levels of that in depression. DHA is one of the main structural units of a neuron cell membrane, and EPA is it's broken down into these we're used to make these eicosanoids, which are these very anti-inflammatory molecules. Fish is also a great source of B12, of iodine, which regulates thyroid function, very important in the brain. And all these, both the leafy greens and in seafood, like for example, sardines are the top source of calcium. I had no idea. Kale is a very good source of calcium, but calcium plays very important roles in the brain. And then unlike a lot of physicians, I talk about meat because the reality is most people eat meat, and we can make better choices, helping people move away from processed meats, deli meats, preserved meats, and move over towards things like fresh grass-fed beef, pasture-raised chicken. You're going to get more nutrient density. You're going to get a better mix of fats for the brain. So those would be, I guess we want to throw in the beans, red beans, or black beans, any colored beans. Beans are like one of the best values, especially dried beans in the grocery store. You soak them, you get some of the gassiness out of there, get some of the phytates out of there. And then recently I've been pitching a lot of fermented foods, things like yogurts and kimchi and pickled vegetables. Again, with the notion of, those having some clear data, they help with gut health. So that's brain food off the top of my head, Jonathan.
Well, I'm sure you have a very healthy brain, so I'm sure that list is quite comprehensive. Dr. Ramsey, the thing that I love about going through and really drawing out the power that these foods have is, I used to be in my previous life really into bodybuilding and almost like competitive physique achievement. And I remember being really plugged into the supplement world, like really plugged in. I'm talking spending hundreds of dollars a month on supplements. And I remember you'd get this package in the mail, or you'd go to the supplement store and you'd pick up this jar of powder, and the jar would be like, it does this, it does this, it does this. And you're like, oh my God, like, take my money. Here's my credit card. Just let me, and then I just want to drink the bottle. I almost wish, and maybe we could do this with your awesome effort, which is National Kale Day, is if you could literally have like a top marketing firm in the world just be like, pick something, kale, and just say like, market it like it was a supplement, and it would blow people's freaking minds because it would kick the crap out of any supplement.
It would, and that's a big part of both 50 Shades of Kale and National Kale Day, is we really try and think about it like that it is so full of nutrition. So we run through, just think about 1 cup of kale, 33 calories. You get 134% of your RDA of vitamin C, 206% of vitamin A. You get 608% of vitamin K, about 10% of your folate, 10% of your vitamins, of your calcium, and 10% of your iron, about 20% of your manganese. I mean, it is so nutrient dense, and I totally agree. We should be marketing these foods as the key to health because, as I'm sure you've experienced, those supplements have a lot of promises and they cost a lot of money. And it always frustrates me when people say, well, I'm really into physical fitness, but I can't afford to eat right. But I can afford all these jars of powder. I think people build such better physiques on real food.
And the thing that is so profound also is, well, if we can attach, because some folks who might be used to eating edible products, if they try to just eat kale because they're like, mom said eat your vegetables, like the whole mom says eat your vegetables approach has, I think, been tried, and as many of us can relate to when we were younger, it doesn't really work. But the whole, like, people will choke down disgusting magic pills and take all these crazy cleanse regimens and they love it and they pay money for it. So it's like, if you truly believe that this thing is almost magical in nature, which, folks, one of the most magical things in the world is Whole Foods. I'll tell you that right now. And I'm not talking about the store. I'm talking about the actual plants. If once you get that in your mind, I mean, Drew, that's what happened for me. I hated vegetables. And then I actually did research onto like what you're talking about. And I was like, if for no other reason, I am just going to drink 1 green shake per day, because once you know this, it's almost like you can't live and not do something about it, because it's so easy. Just like blend it up, drink it. If for no other reason, it will probably save your life.
Yeah, it's the whole food rule is the basic rule, right? Make sure you're eating whole foods. There's really not anything Mother Nature has put on the planet that's bad for you. I mean, even honey. The studies of honey comes with 181 bioactive compounds in it, right? Minerals, phytonutrients. I mean, it's incredible. and sure, it's a source of sugar and sweetness, but you actually can't find sweetness in the natural world without other important nutritional molecules. So it is a message that we want to spread, and I love I love the idea of let's tell people what to eat. Let's help them make those better choices.
And I think when people also, they understand how, I think, actually, you're a great person. I'm going to ask you, as a mental doctor, I know that's not the proper term for it, this is the best I can come up with right now, as a clinical professor of psychiatry, there we go.
Brain doctor. I like to say
brain doctor, there we go. Brain doc. As a brain doc, if I want to feel good, I mean, that's really what we're all after, right? Like, the reason we want to lose weight is ultimately because we think it will make us feel a certain way. And let's say that I'm not clinically anything. Like, I'm just a normal person. Like, I do not have a need for pharmaceutical intervention right now.
Right.
What would you say are the top 3 things I could do to feel better?
All right. Well, here are the top 3 things I'm usually recommending to people are to incorporate more variety of seafood into their diet, moving beyond wild salmon and tuna, and moving on to things like the smaller fatty fish, anchovies, trying to get them to eat more bivalves like mussels and oysters. Those are both good for the environment and the food supply, and also they have the essential things that you need: vitamin B12, vitamin D, the omega-3 fat, DHA. Actually, they have and a fair amount of zinc. And heme iron. Right? These things that you get from anything meaty. I talked to a lot of people about eggs and eating. There's a lot of confusion about eggs, but the data on eggs is good. And eggs are a great way to start the day several times a week. A lot of people have moved away from eggs and egg yolks, and there's just a lot of confusion about dietary cholesterol. And I've actually been both compelled by the data, and I've been loving reading Peter Attia's blog, The War on Insulin, just to give him a shout out. He's got he's like a super math whiz doctor, surgeon, and he's got a great 10-part series on understated cholesterol. Because I've always felt dietary cholesterol is fine, but you always want some backup. And he and Gary Taubes, I think you've interviewed, do a great job talking about that. And then I really try and move people. I try and identify the sort of problems in someone's diet, like snacking, let's say, and help them come up with a good whole food solution. So a lot of my patients will end up, or just regular people I talk to about food, end up having their brain food kit of some almonds and walnuts and maybe a little bit of dark chocolate. So they always have some food with them, and then helping them figure out the leafy greens. It's amazing. I have people keep food journals for me, and they'll come in with a whole week of food. They'll say, "I really tried to do well, doc," and and I'll look through, and you can see they're trying hard, and you won't see a single leafy green in the entire week. Or they'll have a salad in the afternoon, and it'll be, romaine or iceberg or, with some from grilled chicken breast. And so getting people to eat those dark leafy greens, the kales, bok choys, Brussels sprouts, arugula, that's and more kind of lentils and beans. I think those are the main four. You asked for three, but those are the main 4 or 5 that I generally tend to feel everybody can have a better relationship with.
Well, Drew, I so appreciate you sharing that with me and with the listeners, because oftentimes food is used as a drug, right? It's used as a way to make ourselves feel bad, or to feel good. Well, actually, Freudian slip there. Often it does make us feel bad.
Well,
but
I think you're really right, Jonathan. Where a lot of people don't think food is torture because they're doing a crazy math equation. That's why I'm so excited for your book, The Calorie Myth, that's coming out later on this year, because people turn a meal, as I've been saying, they turn a meal into a math equation, and that's no fun, right? That's not like it's no fun to sit there and think, wow, I just made a lot of bad choices because this tasted so good, so I must be getting fat. I mean, that's a horrible way to think about food. And so people, you're right. I think it's an appropriate Freudian slip, being a somewhat disciple of Freud myself, that a lot of people do use food to make themselves feel bad. And I think what's really changing in our messaging and how we want to talk to people about food is, let's think about all the ways that food can make you feel awesome and great. That was actually, one of the motivations with 50 Shades of Kale was to have fun. And I think one of our original taglines was like, slim your waistline, entice your taste buds. Recognizing that people will go to great lengths to lose weight and to feel better. And so, here are some simple ways. Jennifer Isolo, who did all the recipes for this, is an amazing chef. She's cooked for top celebrities all around the country. She's written lots of cookbooks. She's amazing. And she has this great sense of how do you make something so good and never, ever have to worry about the calories. She always gives a calorie count, which I think people want to see and appreciate, even though I think, you and I feel like, don't worry about the calories, but people want to know. And her calorie counts are all, everything in 50 Shades of Kale is under 400 calories. And but it's amazing to me, all the synergies and flavors and all these crazy colors that she brings out and pairs with the kale. We have all these great Asian noodle dishes with these purple kale leaves and these kamame red kale leaves. That just, I was so blessed and happy to work with her and partner with her, because it's just it's just a beautiful book and a beautiful way to think about kale is more than just this green.
Dr. Ramsey, there's two levels of enjoyment that you bring to the table when it comes to food, which I think is so important and so empowering for people. One is the one you just talked to in your wonderful recipe plus book. I say recipe plus because there's a lot more than just recipes in there. 50 Shades of Kale, which is we all just sometimes need to eat something that's delicious. We can't always be eating strategically, for lack of better terms. We want something that's delicious. And we can do that. Like, to be very clear, you can do that and absolutely be healthy. And then you'll feel good for the next 5 hours, not just the next 5 minutes. But what you also offer is when we talk about feeling good, oftentimes when we think about food, we just think about, like, I just ate some chocolate, so I feel like I like mouth feel, yada, yada, yada. But what you show and what you demonstrate clinically is it will actually make you feel good by changing your brain chemistry. Like, there's two levels. There's the like visceral mouth stomach level, but then there's the freaking neurological level. And when you can do both, if you want to eat to feel good, which I think we all do, there really is no debating the matter. The best way to feel the best from food is what we're talking about here.
Yeah, no, you're completely right. And especially when we think about it in context of the new neuroscience, right? When I went to med school, this is like 15 years ago, you learned you got handed a, couple 100 billion neurons, 100 billion, and, that's it. Good luck. And what we've really learned in the last, 8 to 10 years is there are these what are called neurotrophins. They're hormones in the brain that the brain produces, and actually a lot of cells in the body can produce. One example is BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor. And it's literally something that causes neurons to sprout, right? They reach out with these sort of tentacles and connect to other brain cells. We had no idea about this when I was in med school. We know that you can give birth to new brain cells in the hippocampus where you form memories. So you can actually form new brain cells. And the level of BDNF in your body and in your brain is really quite influenced by what you eat. So when you eat, so that's the very cool part is that we've got good epidemiological data, right? Women who eat, for example, more processed food have, about a 40% increased chance of getting depressed over 5 years. We've correlated things like trans fats very clearly, which is a signal, proxy probably signal for processed foods to your risk of depression. We've shown that the Mediterranean diet can decrease your risk of depression and anxiety. So, so we have the epidemiological data, and then we have this very, very cool mechanistic physiological data saying, look at what food does to the brain chemistry, and you get both more neurotransmitters if you eat right, and you get more of these neurotrophins that grow the brain, and it does for me as somebody who likes to both help people and have and also have that be science backed. It's a really satisfying time to be thinking about this right now because there's so much great science coming out.
And it's such an empowering time, too, because everything we're talking about here, we're not saying you need to be hungry. We're not saying you need to go spend hours doing something you don't want to go do. We're saying just eat more delicious whole foods.
Right. I mean, you were talking about health food a minute ago, and I'm thinking, like, I can't remember the last time I haven't eaten something delicious. I mean, all I do all day is eat delicious food, and I think that's where in the happiness diet, Tyler Graham and I, we created 100 reasons not to take supplements and 100 or not to take supplements in place of food, and then 100 reasons not to eat processed foods. And one of the ideas in that is that processed foods really, they give bad data to your brain, right? And they shift your palate. And that when, for example, just coffee with milk. I used to always take my coffee with 2 sugars and milk. And over time, I weaned myself off that sugar, probably about 5 years ago. And now whenever I have milk in my sugar, which is basically every morning, there's a little sweetness to it because lactose is a sugar and is naturally a little bit sweet. And so if you're getting just natural sources of sweetness in your diet, you can still enjoy sweet things. You just don't get skewed. So real food tastes delicious. I mean, this is where I tell people, look, antidepressants take a month to work. Real food, I think you feel some of the benefits in just a couple of days. But the real benefit, especially if you think about this as building a better brain, the real benefit takes several weeks because you're coaxing new brain connections, birth of new brain cells, a real shift state for your brain.
Well, Dr. Ramsey, this is an inspirational very inspirational topic. It's a exciting time to be alive, and we've got a bunch of great resources. We can learn more about you. We've got your new book, 50 Shades of Kale. We've got the Happiness Diet. Folks, you can go over to drewramseymd.com, and you can even check out his blog, the Pharmacy blog, over at Psychology Today. Drew, just to finish up, what's next for you?
Well, I'm really excited to connect with people over 50 Shades of Kale and spread that message. Jennifer Easterloh and I started this initiative, National Kale Day. That's October 2nd this year. We've got a petition in to President Obama. I'd love everybody listening to go over, check out nationalkaleday.org and sign our petition. That's really exciting. And then I'm working on a third book, which is about the connections between my background and my belief in farm fresh food. I come from and help manage my family's 127-acre organic farm in Indiana. And so I'm getting an opportunity to write about that and the connection to how I practice in my office as a psychiatrist in New York City. So those are that and having another child. So that's the next 6 months.
Well, it sounds like you've got a busy 6 months, and folks, it sounds like if we want some science showing us just how we can feel, look, and all up be better tomorrow or even today, check out the Happiness Diet, check out 50 Shades of Kale, check out nationalkaleday.org, check out drewramseymd.com. And Dr. Drew Ramsey, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Jonathan, what fun. Thank you so much for having me on. And, I'm sure everybody listening is very excited about your upcoming book, too. I'm really looking forward to seeing that.
Well, thanks so much, Drew. I appreciate it. And listeners, I hope you enjoyed today's chat as much as I did. And please remember, this week and every week after, eat smarter, exercise smarter, and live better. Talk with you soon.
Wait, don't stop listening yet. If you like the podcast and if there's other ways we can help you, please join us in the Smarter Science of Slim support group, which is freely available at the Smarter Science of Slim website, smarterscienceofslim.com. There you'll find all kinds of free recipes and success stories and just all kinds of fun stuff like how to help your kids go sane and just great community content.
And just one last thing before you go, if you wouldn't mind heading over to iTunes and up onto Amazon.com and leaving us a review, and then going over to Facebook and liking us, we would hugely appreciate it.